on this edition of Sightings. Have we lived before?
She said, "You resemble someone," and she kept staring at my eyes.
This man's amazing journey unlocked the secret to a past life and led him to his lost love.
I told her I'd come back.
Then, in 1975, was this country's strategic defense system shut down by extraterrestrials?
The military was very effective in keeping it quiet.
Could it happen again?
It's not the first time in UFO history, won't be the last.
Plus, a sightings update. Will the Heartland ghost strike again?
I think there is perhaps a lost soul or a spirit that is trying to communicate.
Later, they risk their lives while in an altered state of consciousness.
It's dangerous, there's death there.
And survivors of near-death experiences share a special message.
I'm not afraid to die, that's for sure.
Welcome to Sightings. I'm Tim White. When investigative reporter Tim Stewart agreed to undergo a past life regression, he thought it was just research. He thought it would help him understand a phenomenon that he didn't believe in. And he thought it would help him explode the myth of reincarnation. But Tim Stewart thought wrong.
She kept staring at me and she said, "You resemble someone. Who do you resemble?" And she kept staring at my eyes.
He arrived in a place he'd never been before and felt that he was home. He met a woman he didn't know, but his heart told him something different. Was it imagination, wishful thinking, or was it the end of a journey he was destined to take?
Well, I think with a logical mind, being a scientist, where I'm coming from is what didn't add up. I just discounted.
Tim Stewart's strange journey began here in Albuquerque, New Mexico. A computer scientist by day, Stewart pursued his first love, journalism, as a freelance reporter.
My wife used to tell me that 2 + 2 didn't always have to equal 4, but to me it has to, you know, and so I like to have proof. As far as paranormal and stuff like that, I wasn't that much into it.
But when Stewart was hired to write a series of articles about the paranormal for a national magazine, everything changed.
I was assigned several different topics, and one of the topics happened to be past life therapy.
As part of his research, Stewart became his own guinea pig. He underwent several hypnotherapy sessions with regressionists Elsa LaFlame and Irene Larison.
He felt if he was going to write about it, he wanted to know what the experience was, so that as a writer he could interpret it and write about it in the first person.
The more you go under, the clearer things become. The very first time you go under, the second time, things become hazy, they're not as clear, you're doubting yourself.
But the fourth time Tim Stewart was hypnotized, the unimaginable happened. The impartial reporter began revealing very personal details about a man who had died before Stewart was born.
I knew that I grew up in a town called Allentown, Pennsylvania. I knew that I had brothers, and it was still bits and pieces of a puzzle.
He started coming out with some very good information. He started coming out with names, with places, with descriptions.
She said, "Where are you?" And I said, North Africa. It was just as clear as day. I knew where I was. I knew that my name was on my bag. I had this cold feeling. I was chilled to the bone. I knew that he was part of the 47th Infantry, the 9th Division. I knew that I was born May 27th, 1919. When I was asked to look at the dog tag, it was as clear as me looking at you. I could read the numbers off of it. I was able to bring out his military serial number, his blood type. I kept saying that my name was William, and I knew the last name was Max.
Under hypnosis, a portrait of William Max emerged. He was a soldier, husband, and father, born in 1919 in Allentown, Pennsylvania. But was there really a William Max?
I called the Allentown Library, and we got a hold of the gentleman who is head of genealogy. and he had told me he would look into it.
A month later, Stewart received a letter from the library. Enclosed was the obituary of a man named William Max and his photograph.
I opened it up, and there was William's. It was just a black and white, but still, there was an uncanny resemblance to me. And I started crying. And I don't know why, but I did. You know, it was too much.
Tim Stewart continued to undergo hypnosis, and the memories became even more real.
Every time I went under hypnosis, I felt like something was wrapped around my forehead. I felt like you could literally reach inside my torso. I felt that my left leg, there was something wrong with my left leg.
Vision after vision proved correct. The grave marker he recalled under hypnosis was confirmed by the Pentagon. So were his dog tag numbers. And then, as Tim Stewart filled in more of the everyday details of Max's life, he says he began to feel his soul as well.
I kept talking about this woman in England. I knew her name was M, and Irene asked me and came right out. She said, "Do you know this woman now?" And I said, "Yes." And I said, "She's my wife, Babette."
It was a strange recognition. Tim Stewart looked into the eyes of his wife and saw the reflection of William Max's long-lost love.
I think things that are unfinished in one lifetime, you're given an opportunity to finish in the next.
When Babette was regressed, her first recollections mirrored those of her husband.
It feels like daydreaming. It's sort of like watching an old film in your head.
But then, Babette began to reveal new details. A passionate but short-lived love affair in London that ended with Max's death.
For a long time, she really didn't even know that he was dead. She just assumed that he just never wanted to come back. She loved him, and I think in a lot of ways she was very bitter because he never came back. And no one could really tell her what had happened to him.
She was beautiful. She was as beautiful as my wife is now. And she just, the eyes is what it is. It's the eyes, I guess.
Babette also recalled a name, Emily Ellison. Tim Stewart discovered that there was an Emily Ellison who had lived in London, the daughter of a prominent family. Members of the family were featured in many society columns of the day, but Emily was strangely absent.
In a lot of ways, she was very rebellious against the money and the power and the seclusion. Her father was very strict, very controlling of her life and everything that she did.
When they met in England, I fell in love with her, and I was going to marry her, and I was going to come back. I told her I'd come back, but I never came back.
William Max died in North Africa in 1943. But did he keep his promise to Emily that he would come back? Tim Stewart, the once skeptical reporter, believes Max did keep his promise, and that Tim Stewart was destined to fall in love with Babette because she carries the spirit of Emily within her.
We never really lose each other. Many people are afraid of death, and they're afraid of either losing someone close to them or being lost. And this story really shows how you really don't lose the people that you love and the people who are close to you.
Researching the life and death of William Max was just the first part of Tim Stewart's incredible past life journey. By a strange coincidence, Tim Stewart met William Max's family. It happened when William Max's sister-in-law stopped Stewart, a total stranger, on the street, and said he looked familiar.
Coming up, Tim Stewart confronts his past life when he meets the family of William Max.
I wanted to meet him. I didn't really believe in him.
After his past life regression, skeptical reporter Tim Stewart was still a reporter. But he was also a believer. He fully accepted the fact that he was the reincarnation of a man named William Max. But would the surviving members of Max's family also accept the fact that their dead brother and uncle had returned in the body of Tim Stewart?
They say that we recognize each other through our eyes. Our eyes are the window to the soul. And Babette, whenever I'm hurting or I don't feel right, if she just looks me straight in the eyes, it's wiped away.
Tim and Babette believe their love is eternal, that they continue the love William and Emily could not finish.
Every Christmas, under the Christmas tree, there's always a present from William to M and from M to William. Last year, it was something as inexpensive as, I think, a 75-cent English coin that dated 1943. And it had to be something to link to that life.
Babette's past life is only one link in a chain of strange events that culminated in Tim Stewart's visit to Max's hometown in Pennsylvania. He hadn't been in Allentown since he was 4 years old.
I went back for a funeral, and I mean, probably would have never went back to Pennsylvania, but Uncle Charlie happened to be one of my very favorite uncles. And I was with another aunt and uncle, and we were in the car right behind the hearse, and we happened to pass over a railroad track.
As soon as we got to the railroad tracks, Tim said, "This seems like I've been here before." He says, "I really feel like I've been here."
Tim had to get out of the car. Someone or something was pulling him in strange directions.
It was like, literally the hair on the back of my neck stood on end.
With an unsettling mixture of fear and déjà vu, Tim Stewart rejoined his family and met a momentary stranger.
We had a funeral that day, and Bernice brought Tim and introduced me to him. And when I first saw him, I looked at him and I said, "You remind me of someone that I know."
And I said, "Well, my father's name is so-and-so, my mother's name," and I gave her, she says, "No, no."
I think he reminded me of William from the eyes, the forehead, and the hairline. At the time, I didn't put it together.
And then she introduced herself as Thelma Max. And at that point, I asked her, was she related to William? And she said, yes, I was his sister-in-law.
Thelma Max is the widow of Jerome Max, William's eldest brother. She and her children are the last surviving members of the Max family. They approached Tim Stewart with skepticism.
Tim told us the story of what he had been working on, and I still didn't believe it. I didn't believe it.
But Thelma and her children agreed to take Stewart to the Max family plot. On the way, they quizzed him and challenged his knowledge of the family.
They kept asking me about William's mother. I could never picture her, but I would picture these long, slender windows with lacy curtains blowing away from them.
That's where their mother had died, up in that room, where Tim saw the curtains blowing in.
While he was in Allentown, Tim Stewart retraced the path of William Max's life. He went to his boyhood home, the place where he worked, the railroad tracks where he used to wander.
The doors just started opening up when the word got out in Allentown when I was back there.
I heard about this reincarnation coming back as Billy Max, and I wanted to meet him.
I stood up, and he walks over, and he keeps looking at me and looking at me in the eyes. And he says, well, I got to admit, he says, you look and you stand like William.
Prove it to me. I didn't really believe in any of it.
He says, well, you know, he says, if you really were William, there is one thing that he told only one person.
I asked the question, what it was the last thing that Billy ever said before he left, when he left the United States.
And I said, stop right there. And he said, what? And I said, I can tell you what it is. In 1940, I had a dream that if I went into the service and I shipped overseas, I would never make it home. I'd be killed. And the man went from sitting this way, leaning back, and turned as white as a ghost.
I got goose pimples, to be honest with you. And I'm not saying I believe in it, and I'm not saying I don't believe in it.
I don't know why I know the things that I know. I mean, it's not something, even to this day, I've met the family and everything, but the only way to know is to die. I mean, that's the only guaranteed way of knowing.
Do you feel a special bond to Allentown? Something here?
Every time I've been back here, there's certain things and certain geographical areas that are really...
With time and growing trust, the Maxes have come to accept Tim Stewart as one of the family.
Good, how you been?
Oh.
I think people form love relationships that they continue, the love bonds that they have with family members, and they continue to try to develop those relationships over a period of lifetimes. And I think that's definitely true for Tim.
It was not a coincidence he went to Allentown. I don't believe in coincidences. I really believe that the energies tend to move us where we need to be.
Psychologist and regression therapist Betty Binder believes Tim Stewart was brought to Allentown to bring closure to a life cut short.
an individual who died in World War II, came back very quickly, and has a strong desire to complete something or find somebody.
Babette thinks she knows who William Max is trying to find. During her regressions, Babette has seen Emily with a baby.
I thought that they had had a child together and that he had never known that the child existed. It also came out during one of my regressions that she had died before the child was very old.
Was a son, and she called him David.
If there was a David, his father and mother were dead before he was one. Where this war orphan is 50 years later is one mystery Stewart can't solve.
My gut feeling is if the child made it through the war, that more than likely he's alive and well, probably living in England.
Tim Stewart continues to use his reporter's instincts to search for clues about David, the son that would be older than he is.
I guess there's sort of a fear to find this person and be rejected by them. On the same hand, there's like a nurturing aspect where you want to find them to make sure they're okay.
What started as just another job, one more magazine article to write, has become a lifelong quest. Tim Stewart feels he must find William Max's child.
William Max is as much a part of my soul as I will be when I pass on, and those two people merge.
Tim Stewart continues to search for his son from a past life. The child, first named David, was born in Devonshire, England, and would be in his 50s today. He may have been adopted. His birth mother, who died in the late 40s, was Marion M. Ellison. His birth father was William Max.
Next, will paranormal researchers find an answer to the Heartland mysteries?
With further investigation, we have a good opportunity to solve this mystery, yes.
She scares the living daylights out of me.
For almost one full year, Sightings has conducted an ongoing investigation into unprecedented haunting activity inside one unassuming house in America's heartland. We've heard from many viewers who have intriguing theories about the source of the haunting activity. So, armed with your recommendations, we now return to the house.
Sally, stop it.
Look, one's starting to bleed.
Oh, why don't you sit down?
There's a little girl that's standing right there.
Sally? Is that your name, Sally?
MC.
Yeah, we've got a new scratch.
There's an entity in this room right now. No doubt in my mind. Something is burning my face, like right now.
Whoa! In full view of 8 witnesses.
You physically felt that?
Yeah, that hurt.
After our last visit there, I became more convinced that this phenomena was legitimate, that there was something really going on. One of the most unique elements are the scratches, of course. I've been there, I've witnessed them happening while I was observing him.
It's the story Sightings viewers can't stop talking about, especially those strange bleeding scratches. Parapsychologist Carrie Gaynor responds to your suggestions that the bleeding scratches could have a medical rather than a paranormal explanation.
I've been researching a skin condition called dermatographism, and what that is a person can scratch himself and nothing will show up until about 10 or 15 minutes later. And this is very interesting in light of the way this phenomenon is occurring in this case. The references that I've looked at so far do not include bleeding with this skin condition, and certainly in this case, there have been bleeding scratch marks. So this doesn't seem to be a very good explanation for what's going on in this case.
Many viewers also wanted to know more about the child entity known as Sally. Sightings was chastised for overlooking a religious explanation, so our team now includes Franciscan monk Father Ed Anthony.
I would not consider Heartland to be an extreme case. I don't think there's demonic possessions going on. I think what's happening there is perhaps we would maybe call a lost soul or a spirit that is trying to communicate. When you try to communicate with somebody, if they're not listening to you, if they're not paying attention to you, you're going to do all kinds of things to get that person's attention. I think perhaps a spirit would do the same thing.
Many viewers have suggested that the scratching is actually stigmata, which they define as a physical manifestation of Christ's crucifixion wounds.
I don't think Jeff is experiencing a stigmata. I think you have to look at, is there a connection to the doctor who was involved or who was there when this young girl died? There is a part in Scripture that says, and the sins shall be passed from generation to generation upon your children's children's children, however. You know, what happens is it can jump over generations. Things can manifest themselves or things can become present generations later.
I've heard of these things happening, and I think that you can find a psychological reason for it all the time. Not to say that there may not also be a ghost or an entity or some kind of spiritual explanation that goes along with it. But I think there's also a psychological connection.
Psychiatrist Dr. Carol Lieberman agrees with many Sightings viewers that there is a psychological explanation for the haunting activity. Something about Pam and Jeff makes them more susceptible to haunting activity.
Some people believe that ghosts don't just attach themselves, or entities don't just attach themselves to anyone, or don't just come in at any time. That people, the more open a person is, in various ways, vulnerable or open in a positive way, the more they're likely to affect them.
If we just drop our skepticism just for a moment, and as a researcher, I'm not really allowed to do that, but there's a real human angle here, and that is a man's being terrorized. Something is happening to him without his say, without his control, and he's got to be thinking to himself, well, if this could happen, what else could happen?
She scares the living daylights out of me.
If I had to come up with one global explanation to include the whole family psychodynamics, as well as the spiritual entities that may dwell there, I would say that it has to do with a lot of anger directed at father figures for abuses that have gone on through the ages, with the anger at fathers or father figures.
These expert opinions are important, but as long as Jeff and Pam remained in the house, the entities didn't appear to pay any attention to expert opinion. Now, a new family lives in the house. So far, they've experienced no haunting activity.
When I go around town, everyone asks, when I tell them where I'm living, they start talking about it, and they tell me I've heard so many stories, and I was surprised that there's so many people that believe this stuff.
If the activity continues in the house with the new family, then what we have is a traditional haunt. And the people coming into the environment might bring that phenomena out. So it's even possible that somebody could live there and nothing would happen. If, on the other hand, it follows the family to their new home, then we have a haunt, really, that seems to be centered around an individual. Jeff.
You're being asked to help Sally. The danger sometimes comes in, I think, with things like this, when we refuse to do that. You asked me earlier if there is any physical possibility of any physical danger or harm. I think there could be.
With further investigation, we have a good opportunity to solve this mystery, yes. I think we have a pretty good chance.
While the house is quiet now, both Carrie Gaynor and psychic Peter James believe there are two spirits, one good and one bad. There is also reason to believe that Sally, the so-called bad spirit, may have followed the former residents to their new house. We'll keep you updated.
Coming up, did extraterrestrials sabotage U.S. missile sites?
An object managed to change the tracking numbers on the missile.
Then, altered states of consciousness may keep them alive. And later, back from the dead with messages of hope.
Sightings has in its possession authenticated Defense Department memoranda, which state in no uncertain terms that military personnel sighted UFOs over 3 different nuclear weapons storage facilities in 1975. At least one missile was compromised by what one DoD memo describes as clear intent. Ufologists believe that the damage was much more extensive and that our entire nuclear arsenal could have been the victim of extraterrestrial sabotage. In the 1960s and 70s, these images of a vast underground security network allowed America to sleep at night. A security blanket of nuclear weaponry, poised at the ready. But in the fall of 1975, someone, or something, tampered with our nuclear capability. Supposedly infallible systems were incapacitated. An unknown force was at work. Military personnel observed it, but could not stop it. Security was breached at 3 U.S. nuclear installations. At each base, eyewitnesses reported seeing unidentified craft hovering above nuclear storage facilities.
The speed it took off with, I've seen F-16s fly high rates of speed. And this was here and gone from a dead still hover.
One of the installations was here, Wurtsmith Air Force Base in Oscoda, Michigan. The base is closed now, but in 1975, it was on 24-hour alert, armed and ready for a nuclear strike. In October of that year, the practiced routine was suddenly shattered by an alarm. Radar was picking up an unidentified craft advancing toward the base at a high rate of speed. This was not a drill.
This is Top Rock with an expedite scramble. Authentication time is 1906. Scramble. Roger that.
On radar, the UFO appeared to be closing in fast, but jet interceptors could not locate any aircraft in the area. Author Barry Greenwood has spent nearly 20 years researching the 1975 incident.
There were at least a dozen U.S. and Canadian military bases that were overflown during a 3-week period in 1975.
According to this Defense Department memorandum, military personnel filed official sightings reports after visual and radar contact was established. In each case, the UFO appeared to be headed directly for nuclear weapons storage facilities.
The person writing the report stated that when one object came low over a weapons storage area, that it appeared to demonstrate a clear intent over this area, meaning it seemed to have intelligence. We've spoken to a number of eyewitnesses involved in the 75 incidents. They are all emphatic that what was seen was certainly not conventional aircraft.
One of the eyewitnesses to the Wurtsmith incident was civilian aircraft mechanic Rick Eberhardt. In 1975, he lived directly across from Wurtsmith's main gate.
One evening I went to bed approximately 1 o'clock. I was awakened in the morning by a bright, glowing orange colored light that was coming in through our sliding glass doors. Bright orange, glowing orange, fluorescent orange. I don't think I've ever seen an orange that bright in my life. It lit up my house on the inside like we had the lights on. So I got up to investigate, went to the sliding room doors, looked out over the creek. There was a large, glowing orange oval-shaped object. To me, it looked like it was probably about 2 to 3 football field lengths long and a good couple wide. It hovered over there for, I'd say, good 3 to 4 minutes. And at that time, it sped off at a high rate of speed, heading away from the airbase. I was scared. There was fear running through me, and I couldn't believe what I had seen.
Eberhardt's testimony is important because military eyewitnesses will not talk on the record.
It's very difficult to find military witnesses because they're, at the time, covered by regulations. They certainly cannot take a story like a UFO sighting and go running to the press with it. And I decided, along with several other researchers, to file Freedom of Information requests with the Pentagon, with the Air Force, with the bases involved to find out if there was some documentation as to what was occurring over these bases. And the Pentagon had advised the bases to invoke a Security Option 3 alert.
According to this Air Force document, the high-level security alert was ordered because, quote, penetration of sensitive areas during the hours of darkness have prompted the implementation of Security Option 3 at our northern tier bases, unquote. Sightings had occurred at Malmstrom, Wurtsmith, and Loring Air Force bases.
The reason this is so significant and interesting is that they seem to be focused on atomic weapons and some mysterious objects, which they call mystery helicopters. Some kind of unidentified objects were seen and tracked on radar flying around in areas where they had no business being. In fact, these bases, because of what they stood for, they were our massive retaliation capability, and therefore they were very high security bases with usually security police and guard dogs, barbed wire, alarm systems, all kinds of things that made them very highly secure bases. And that's why this is so significant, that whatever this was flying around could just penetrate all these defenses at will.
Timothy Good is the author of Above Top Secret. He believes the extent of the UFO invasion was far greater than the 3 incidents reported by the Air Force.
According to some researchers,
and some people who have come forward. There were several occasions when UFOs hovered over the nuclear missile silos when it was shown on the control panel that the missile would not have been able to have been launched.
Could UFOs invade and neutralize America's missile launch capability? According to ufologists, they could, and did.
Malmstrom Air Force Base during the first week of November of '75 had several intrusions near missile silos, one involving an object which, according to one witness, hovered over the silo and somehow managed to change the tracking numbers on the missile. According to the witness, the missile had to be removed and retooled to make it work again. And to see this, not in UFO books, but in government military messages, was a real eye-opener. And I think that if the public had known that at the time, there would have been great alarm.
To the Air Force, Wurtsmith is a dinosaur whose extinction was made possible by the end of the Cold War. To ufologists, it's a silent reminder that UFOs have been among us and that their intent is clear.
So it's not the first time in UFO history, it won't be the last. There are lots of cases where these things were real and unexplained and flying in and out of these top security areas at will, and they had no control over it. This would cause them a serious problem. They can't say, we're defending you. They just can't. It's beyond their capability, and they shouldn't be held to blame for this. I just wish they would be a little more candid about, with the public, about what goes on in these cases.
The United States Air Force continues to deny allegations that the 1975 sightings incapacitated our nuclear defense systems. But they do not deny that there was clear intent displayed by UFOs flying over Wurtsmith, Loring, and Malmstrom Air Force bases.
Next, snakes in the pulpit lead these people to altered states of consciousness.
They handle fire, snakes, drink strychnine without being injured.
Recent studies indicate that altered states of consciousness, deep relaxation, for example, can ease pain and alleviate symptoms of disease. But are there mental states that can actually shield the physical body from disease and even death? In small churches throughout America, people in an altered state of consciousness are drinking poison, handling cobras, and living to tell about it. In the Old Testament, the snake is a powerful symbol of man's fall from grace, the messenger of temptation and physical embodiment of sin. In rural churches throughout America, practitioners believe that they can confront the dark powers of sin and emerge unscathed. In an altered state of consciousness known as the anointing, they grasp poisonous snakes and drink lethal doses of strychnine.
The reason why we handle snakes is because the Bible says in Mark 16, they shall take up serpents. And we also believe that the Bible says that if they drink any deadly thing, it shall not hurt them. And we believe, you know, through the power and the Spirit of God that we can do it and it will not hurt us.
The participants typically work themselves into some kind of state of altered consciousness. You become so heightened as to what you're looking for that it literally alters the body chemistry.
Author Fred Wolf is a physicist who researches altered states of consciousness and searches for a scientific explanation.
If you're doing something very extraordinary, I believe that there will be a change in your body chemistry, there will be a change in your neurophysiology, there will be a change in the way your brain is functioning, over and beyond the normal way that your brain would function.
Skeptics charge that the rituals are fake, that the snakes are not always venomous, and the strychnine is so diluted it could not be lethal. But independent tests have shown that the venom and poison are.
They become immune to snake bite, to strychnine, because they've taken so much into their bodies over a period of time in small enough dosages that by the time they get to a larger dosage that would kill me, their bodies have been protected by the immunization process.
But for the devout, there is only one explanation for their immunity: faith in the power of God. In this home video from Eastern Kentucky, practitioner Grace Holland appears to drink strychnine and handle fire while in the throes of a religious ecstasy.
The most fascinating thing to me about this religion is they handle fire, they handle snakes, they drink strychnine, they get through this without being injured. It's absolutely unbelievable to me.
Most of the snake churches are located in rural areas of Appalachia and the Deep South. Services aren't advertised because the use of snakes in the pulpit is outlawed in most localities. Practitioners often worship in defiance of the law or go to places where snake handling is allowed, like this church in Kingston, Georgia.
If the Lord is with you, you're not afraid at all. When I get the sensation to pick up a serpent, it's just, you can feel it go right through your hands and out your feet. I mean, it's wonderful. It's a protecting spirit that you feel all about you.
Religious historian David Kimbrough has researched the practices of Pentecostal snake handling churches for 10 years.
Snake handling is extremely dangerous. Since I've been doing my research, studying this movement since 1910, I have found 73 deaths by snake bite, 5 additional deaths by people drinking strychnine. So I think that tells the story that it's a very dangerous concept. When you reach in that box, you know that you can be taken out of this world.
Primarily we use copperheads and cottonmouths and rattlesnakes, and occasionally we get cobras and coral snakes too. And the most dangerous, I would say, would be the rattlesnake. Obviously, this is a very dangerous practice, and we don't encourage nobody to do it, you know. As a matter of fact, we discourage you to do it unless you're anointed by the Spirit of God.
I'm very fearful of snakes, but when the anointing's on me, it don't bother me one bit to pick them up.
You ain't got the Lord in you, you better leave it alone. And it's dangerous, there's death there.
Sightings presents this report as an example of the effect of altered states on some people some of the time. There have been deaths. In fact, one of the members of the Georgia community in this report has recently died after being bitten by a rattlesnake in church. Never assume that you are safe. Never pick up a poisonous snake.
Up next, a near-death experience transforms a life.
This being of light approached me, and I was told that it's the little things that we do that lead to good.
The validity of near-death experience is being challenged. Some members of the scientific community believe that the tunnel, the white light, and the angelic figures are all hallucinations induced by oxygen deprivation. But these visions are only a small part of the near-death experience. What science cannot explain away are the physical and spiritual transformations that occur after an NDE. They claim to have walked through the invisible door between this world and the next and have glimpsed life after death. But before they take the final irretrievable step into oblivion, they are pulled back for a purpose, and then transformed by what is called the near-death experience.
Before I had the near-death experience, I was not a good person at all.
I was fearful, materialistic.
I was a high-pressure guy after a lot of bucks.
I was just lost. I was totally depressed, totally sick, couldn't put one foot in front of the other.
Sandy Green fell into a deep depression after her husband of 26 years asked for a divorce. Shortly after, she was diagnosed with cancer. It was during radiation treatment that she had her NDE.
My angels took me out into the white light. It just pulsated with the brightest light, and it was love. It was pulsating love. The nice thing I remember is there was no pain. I received the energies and the knowledge and the help to learn how to become well if I wanted to go back and learn how to save my life and then teach others how to do it. I would have a loving life again. And boy, is that powerful for a person like me who lost everything.
Sandy was transformed emotionally and physically. Working with Orlando's Getting Well program, she beat her cancer.
Anger stops my creativity. It actually increases my tumor markers.
Her physician, Dr. Peter Goulden, has charted Sandy's remarkable recovery.
When we see that happen, we try to pin that down by something we've done as the profession. Was it that radiation that we gave? How about the chemotherapy, etc.? And a lot of times we don't have an adequate explanation for why things got better. And so Who knows?
Sandy has returned to her nursing career with a new mission. She is the founder of Hope and Recovery, a program which provides home care for cancer patients.
I try to sell them on the adventure, because mine has been an adventure, not the trials and tribulations of cancer, but my adventure. Hope is believing that anything is possible.
Hope was not a word in Angie Fenimore's vocabulary when she had her NDE after a failed suicide attempt.
I really had some feelings of self-doubt, thought I was a bad mother and a bad wife, and I decided I was just going to end my life, but I had no other choice.
Angie took an overdose of pills and slit her wrists to end the pain, but there was no comfort in death.
I started looking around for a tunnel of light like I'd, heard about, and there was nothing there except for darkness. And I heard the words, "Is this what you really want?" And in the time that it took for me to hear those words, this being of light approached me. I was filled with truths and with pure knowledge, pure understanding of how life works. And I was told that it's the little things that we do that lead to good and light in the world. After my near-death experience, I could see clearly how I had created the problems in my life and quite easily how they could be avoided.
For Angie, the experience revealed one supreme truth that transformed her life: the overwhelming power of love.
Not love in the usual personal sense, but a kind of universal love. It's easy to understand why people speak in this way, though, because it's exactly that they feel filled with during their NDE, and they can't help radiating it afterward. But that's it. It's love.
It was just that love and serenity, just I can't put it in words what it was like, but it was beautiful.
Dee Wagner was a heroin addict and an unfit mother, according to the court that took her daughter away. But then Dee had an NDE.
Before her near-death experience, my mom had no respect for herself. She was into her partying and her drugs and her dealing, and it was more like I was the parent in our relationship. I always took care of my mom. After my mom's near-death experience, she turned into a person that's loving and caring and has respect for people and herself.
I have a relationship with Tanya again, and it's a pretty good relationship. People that know me say that I'm different as night and day, made a 180-degree turnaround. And I'm not afraid to die, that's for sure, because I got to get a glimpse of where I would be going. And I'm glad I have a second chance, because when I do go, I'll be going clean and sober.
Sandy, Angie, and Dee continue to spread their message of universal love. They believe that everyone is capable of personal transformations without having to endure a near-death experience.
Sightings has expanded its America Online area. Keyword Sightings when you log on for access to Sightings stories, images, and events. To subscribe to America Online, call 1-800-591-3344. And you can still reach Sightings 24 hours a day at 1-900-933-7444.
Until next time, remember, no mystery is closed to an open mind. For Sightings, I'm Tim White.